Oh yeah, that was, yeah. Well, this thing is great.
But
so much louder.
that's the neon code made by John Law. Yes, it was incredibly loud because it was under an overpass, so everybody was kind of stuck in there.
Party.
Street sweets.
Street sweeper, nice.
I don't know. I didn't hear it. Seattle, 1986. Tokyo, 1986. Building damage. I would say.
Thank you so much for coming, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much to Stephen Parr for providing this great space. Mark is using the restroom for a second, so I'm going to excite you with a few quick announcements. I'm located in Venice, California, and if you're interested in my events, you go to laughtears.com and you can find out more. And I come up here once a year, and I welcome your suggestions right here. I've done Eric Davis, John Law, and Bishop Joey, and it's a real honor to have Mark here. Thank you, Mark. And just briefly, I wanted to mention that I'm going to have an event tomorrow night at Craig Baldwin's Other Cinema featuring Pixel Vision. It's a toy video camera. And then Sunday, I'm going to be celebrating Mez Mesro's book, Really the Blues. He was Louis Armstrong's Jewish pot dealer, and he wrote an amazing book on music, which spawned Henry Miller, Allen Ginsberg, Tom Waits, and the Gangster Rappers. It was co-written by a cybernetics pioneer, Bernard Wolfe. So that's at Bird and Beckett at 4:30, and Sunday night at Crow's Work in Oakland, a gallery will be doing a multimedia event too. So the format of this interview is I'm going to interview Mark for about 90 minutes, and then we're going to open up for Q&A from the audience. So appreciate your respecting that format. And it's a real honor, Mark, to have you here, and thank you for that amazing clip show. The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being is to be able to, well, you mean right now?
Sure.
Right now, the best thing for a human being, I think the top of the line, is to just, for a human being to have access to technology in its, in all its many and varied forms, because that's the culmination of all of the intelligence and all the energy that the human race has managed to muster up into this point, and to be able to, it's to the point where when you touch it, you feel all the thousands of years of work that went into the thing you're holding now, an iPhone or like any kind of piece of technology. And for me, it's a very reverent experience. So obsessive experience. I mean, maybe for some people it's reverent, but for me, it's kind of just become an obsession, and the only way to satisfy it is to be as close to technology as I can get. That's my church.
Very good. What's your favorite form of information?
My favorite form of information is news, for just straight information without, because I like to try to happened.
In what
Yeah.
format are you consuming it? TV, internet, newspapers,
I
or all?
read the news, by probably a dozen, 20 newspapers or blogs every day for probably a couple hours.
Do you really?
And I have read the newspaper almost every day since I was like at 14.
Did
So for me, it's kind of like soap operas. It's sort of like, you
Yeah.
know, I'm addicted to the news in the way that some people are addicted to soap operas.
Yeah. So did you grow up a reader on your own, saying I want to read, or were your parents reader and that was an example, or did they encourage you to read?
Well, I grew up and my mom ran a bookstore, and she was an English literature major. So she was very invested. Her goal in life, and she didn't tell me till she had retired from her job, but her goal her whole life was to be a librarian. That's what she wanted to be. But because she was running a bookstore, she was managing, you know, for the town I was in, a pretty good sized bookstore. She had, you know, she was always reading. Like, she wasn't trying to take care of us, she was reading. But every night she would read, no matter what, she would read every night. And so, you know, I mean, obviously something was going on.
Yeah.
But I became an avid reader at a very, very young age. And I was lucky enough to have, for some reason, the elementary school I went to had a speed reading several-year training where the goal was to get people up to 3,000 words a minute with 100% comprehension. It was just some experiment that they did in my school, but the good thing about it was I learned how to read really quickly and to comprehend it, so that when you read, it was more like you were watching a movie.
Yeah. Or the question is actually, why do you think humans collect information?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, I'll take it on an anecdotal answer for that. Is, you know, if I don't, for instance, if I don't read, in particular, if I don't read like a fiction book or a complicated, nonfiction work, pretty often, like I have to pretty much have a book all the time. If I don't, my mind starts to decay. Like there's something about the order and organization that a writer puts into crafting the words that I take away from it, and I feel like I've taken like a wonder drug. But I don't really think about it like that. I just notice that when I don't read enough, I become kind of stupid. Yeah. And I think that that's part of it. Part of it is, you know, absorbing information makes your mind work more efficiently, and it's you know, it revs it up.
Yeah.
It revs it up, and I think we like to be revved up. It's fun to be revved up. So
Yeah.
I think that that's why people are obsessive about it.
Right. Then you process.
That's the idea.
Beautiful. So, and do you think this need or want to collect information is hardwired, or did we learn it? Is it in our DNA, or is it something we learn?
Well, I just think it's part. I mean, I think once you have, you know, language and symbolic, once you have symbolic language and writing and things like that, your mind just, you know, that's just. Once you have the equipment to do it and you have a reason to do it, then people do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the tie that binds, right? I suppose.
It's good.
So,
And can you conjure up your earliest memory ever?
my earliest memory ever, yes. My earliest memory ever was when I pulled the cord on the iron that was on my mom's ironing board, and I wasn't able to walk, so I was under 1 year old, and I pulled the cord, and the iron fell down, but it pulled the cord out of the iron. And then I was holding the cord like this, looking at it. I remember now looking at the electric cord with this copper shiny wires, and I was getting ready to put it in my mouth. My mom walked in and screamed, and I dropped it, and it went bzzz, and I still have a scar right there from when it burned, the electricity burned me. I don't really remember anything after that. But I remember that pretty well. I remember that. I remember it was that kind of brown cloth cord with the white flecks in it.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Beautiful. And do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Well, you know, I don't know if I have a pretty good memory. I have a big shop. There's probably, I think, a couple million things in my shop.
Yeah.
And I pride myself on remembering where every one of them is. And I think that by the act of remembering all these things, it's helped me maintain a good memory. But I don't know if I'd want to have a photographic memory.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to remember everything, because I'm pretty good. I think the better your memory is, the better you have to be at compartmentalizing your memory so that they don't overwhelm you.
Yeah.
You know, and also I think the better your memory is, the less emotions you can have, because the more your emotions are tied up in your memories that keep coming up. And I think that that's you know, it makes a good movie, but it's not. I don't think it's been very productive. Painful.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the word emotions too. Do thoughts create emotions?
The thoughts create. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Thoughts when you think about them create emotions. If you don't think about them, they don't create emotions.
Yeah.
If you ignore them,
Yeah.
if you're indifferent to them, then you're not going to do anything to you.
Yeah. And this question's two-part. Growing up, who were your earliest role models or just major influences within your immediate family? And then the second part is outside your immediate family. Just briefly, a couple, say.
Let's see. Well, I remember, well, the people who were really my idols when I was a kid were all these other older kids around me who were all like, kind of like, their parents were beatniks, and, you know, they were like, you know, they had gone to New York City and everything like that. And then, let's see, I think one of my first big idols was two of my friends, Trent Gray and another guy, were all excited one day, and they go, I said, what's going on? And it was like, school was out, and they go, we're going to New York City, we're going to work at Andy Warhol's factory. And they were totally these two weird gay hipster guys. I was like 14, I was like, well, that's cool, that's neat, because I heard Andy Warhol, so they went there, and then they came back, and they were totally dressed like pink flamingos. And that became, that style of dressing, this was 1967, that style of dressing became like a cool thing that was going on. And then there was a whole crowd of people that was Paul Rubenfeld, Pee Wee Herman, and like what were they, the Hoy sisters. The Hoy sisters, these super tall model-looking women who like, so they were the gay crowd, and there were a few other people. They would sit next to all us hipsters. We were like the punk hipsters. And we would sit together every day at lunch, and we would go to the same parties. We would go to the fag hag parties at Lola's in like 1968, 69. But anyway, that was,
Yeah.
you know, that was like a big, like Andy Warhol. Everyone was always talking about Andy Warhol back in like 69 and 70. And people tried to look, there was a whole crowd of people trying to look like him. So I remember my part in that was I had to get glasses. I didn't know I had to get glasses, and so I wanted to have glasses that looked like Andy Warhol's glasses. So that's what I told the optometrist. I said, well, I need to have Andy Warhol type glasses. He goes, okay, we've got those. So you could just get them new back then. And so I got a pair like this, but they were red on the top. They had plastic on the top. And that was...
Beautiful, thank you.
He was like that was one of my first, he was a groupie for, I felt like I was kind of an Andy Warhol groupie. Yeah. And then, you know, of course, the music people, there was all the, you know, like Frank Zappa. I always wanted to meet Frank Zappa when I was a little kid. And the Fugs, I always wanted to meet people in the Fugs when I was a little kid. But
that was good. And so, did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yeah, atheism.
Did they?
Well, I used to get and my grandfather used to gave us a subscription for my whole high school years to the Atheist newsletter. I don't know if anybody knows what the Atheist newsletter is, but it was the newsletter, and every issue there would be a weird, goofy picture of the anti-pope, a guy dressed up in like pope outfits, going and doing some crazy, irreverent thing, and they had all the information on the church, separation of church and state. And so we used to get that, I think, twice a month. We used to get that. So. But I went to Catholic school, and then we moved. And I went to Catholic school up to 6th grade. And we moved, and I said, well, so I guess I have to go to a new church now. My mom looked at me, and I was in the car, and she goes, well, you don't know, you don't. I said, what do you mean I don't have to? She goes, well, you don't have to. And I said, well, don't you want me to? And she goes, well, I don't care. And I said, don't you believe in that stuff? And she goes, no. And I was like, well, why did I go to this school for? She goes, when me and your dad got divorced, that's what he wanted. So I said, well, what about my grandma? She goes, oh no, she'd rather go to hell when she dies than leave all those Christians. And so from that day on, I went the opposite direction.
Beautiful. And so, do you think evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
You know, it's interesting that you asked that, because I was a draftivator. And when you're a draftivator, you have to tell them a reason. And I told them I was crazy. My doctor made up a fake history of me being an insane, violent person. But you have to see 5 psychiatrists. And that was the first question that the second psychiatrist asked me.
Did he? Really?
Yeah. He goes, do you think people are inherently evil, or do you think they're inherently good? And I said, I think they're really evil. I think they're really evil. They're always trying to do something to you. That's what I told him. I had a whole crazy paranoid rap, because I read psychology magazines and magazines about pathologies and case studies of like individuals that were psychotic. And so I was trying to model my behavior in front of these psychiatrists on like a just borderline psychosis, so I wouldn't get drafted. I had a very low number. So yeah, that was. But yeah, I don't know. I think that. Wait a minute. I was just having a flashback. Excuse me.
No, let me just answer all my questions. The answer's not important. It's we're talking here. But no, please, I'm curious too. Do you think evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think that people who are unhappy get kind of evil. You know, people who are frustrated or unhappy for whatever reason, you know, because the barriers that they've found exist, or ones they've created, or ones other people have created. You know, some people just get mean.
Yeah.
You know, and usually if there's a reason. Most people usually are mean and not nice to other people for some reason. I mean, maybe it's not it doesn't seem like a good reason to you or me or anyone else, but, you know, anyone who does something that is really nasty will usually tell you why they did it. You know, or they'll just say they're just a flat-out nihilist and they just did it because they think they can.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah. Well, this question's follow-up in that, how would you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And let me just set this one up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. That's morphed into the word frenemy. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Pauline says, I need an enemy. And lastly, Chinese proverb goes, if you can't agree with your enemy, you'll be controlled by them. So it's a lot of thoughts. Basically, the question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But before you start, how would you specifically react to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I don't really know if I've had any real enemies yet. I've thought that I might have had enemies a couple times, but then, now I was never really sure about it. So I don't really know if I'm qualified. Okay. I don't know if I really have any yet. You know, I mean, an enemy, my definition of an enemy is someone who's just like flat out to get you. Yeah. You know, and there's, it's like a freight train coming at you. There's nothing you can do or say. They're just going to try to get you. And I don't really feel like I've ever had that happen. Not yet anyway. I mean, I don't know. Right. So I guess if I did, I would do whatever I could to keep them from, harming me or my friends. But I don't know. Yeah. I think about that. I think about that all the time. I think about what would happen, if I had a real, someone was out to get me. Yeah. But it just, the world always ends. It always ends with a whimper. It never a bang. Yeah. There you go. So, I don't know.
Well, James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. Basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner says, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. why do we as humans have to recreate things in order to get them? In other words, why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, I think that the best treatise on that was a book by J.K. Huysmans called Against Nature, which was a whole book about him like trying to submerge himself in artifice. It was written in the 1890s, and it starts out, the opening sequence in the book is a guy walking his painted lobster in a park in Paris. And then he goes and lives in an underground house that's completely cut off from, you know, it completely cuts himself off from reality, has nothing real in his life. He just does whatever he can. It's all about his internal struggles. It's very Catholic kind of internal struggle. But, you know, I think that for some people, and, you know, for me too, sometimes there's like a pain to, you know, real things are very vivid. I mean, that was the original HD, right? The original HD was like the real world. And like, you know, I mean, it's pretty, our senses are sensitive enough that it's, you know, it's extreme when you see it in all its glory. I think a lot of people just get tired of it. I think it wears people out, you know, just like watching, you know, some people get worn out by watching action movies. You know, some people get worn out by like looking at the trees and stuff.
Yeah.
It's, you know, tiring.
What do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
The cave artist?
Yeah.
I just think they were probably kind of bored. I mean, you know, they had developing brains. They were probably starting to talk a little bit, and there's maybe a lot, who knows, but in trading beads and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, is that all there is? I mean, you could just see how it wouldn't, you know, once you kind of like, I think it was people who like kind of had it made, you know. I think some cave people were having a hard time, but other cave people were just like, there was food everywhere, you know, there was plenty to eat, it was easy to hunt things, there were animals around them were slow, they could kill them easy, you know, and so they had it made. And I think those were the people that did the painting. I think they were just like kind of fat cats just kind of hanging around, and like kids with a trust fund, they tend to become artists too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, that was sort of the follow-up question, which I just recently added, is has the motive of artists changed since the cave artist?
Well, if that motive is as I perceived it, that it's like kids, you know, people with nothing better to do, and you know, just time on their hands, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that, you know, but I mean, not everyone does it for that motive. Some people are just, you know, obsessive. Some people see something. Some people imagine a door and they just decide to walk through it. You know, what is that? There's a psychological term for people like that, where you just aren't aware of your, you know, dyslexia or something like that. And that's not that. It's something where don't really perceive the dangers or ramifications of your actions. And so I think that, you know, artists tend to be people who are a little bit touched that way, but they don't really consider like what it means to be doing something that maybe no one's ever going to give them any money for. They don't really care about it, don't think about it. They just get obsessed with something about it, you know. But I think for the most part, it's just like people who don't want to work at a regular job.
Yeah. That reminds me of McLuhan said that ambiguity is a form of human maturity. And some people would say, well, that's not right. We shouldn't be ambiguous. But this question concerns intention. A screenwriting teacher told me that he thinks a great film or a great piece of art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. And in talking to other artists and filmmakers about this, one said, well, Kubrick says the opposite. A great film or a great piece of art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. Can you talk about intention in your creative process?
Yeah, I'm kind of more in the James Joyce sort of varietal, garden variety. I like to think that there's just enough inconsistencies and dead ends and loose ends in all the things I've done and the projects I've been involved with that, you know, I think what's missing is I don't really know if anyone's going to be it's compelling enough of a story. That's what I'm trying to work on now, is make the story compelling enough that maybe someday in the future somebody would want to do that. I don't really think it's quite there yet. I think I've got a ways to go, but you know, I think that I'm more. You know, I like telling stories that are more implicit, where any meaning that you're going to find is an implied meaning and not an explicit meaning. Or
Right.
if it's explicit, it's reflected onto itself and shadowed in a way that it's whatever sense it made becomes nonsense. And so that's to me that's more interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just better equipped to do that. I mean, I'm not really a narrative kind of guy.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
I'm
Yeah.
a failed writer. That's
You know,
I wanted to be a writer when I was a teenager.
You know,
I just couldn't break down and do it. So
It's beautiful.
I did this
That-
instead.
Actually, Zappa said, I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure.
There you go.
Yeah. And so that was beautiful, Mark, because you know, I'm really impressed with your longevity, and you know, we're honored to be here, and you're showing us years of work, and you've been dedicated, and you're still going. And one of these videos I saw a couple days ago, it says, yeah, I'll be probably doing this for 50 to 70 years, you know, and you just set it out like, it's not like I'm going to reach this goal. Like we all know, it's like the journey that's important. Reaching is another thing. How do you explain your longevity, especially in your dedication to your drive? Keep going.
Well, I just feel like there's always more stuff to do. You know, I just think it's interesting. You know, it's a game. You know, gaming the whole situation and trying to figure out how to make it work. And you know, when I thought up the idea of doing SRL, I just sat down and thought it up. And one of the reasons I did it was because I just went, whoa, you know, I'm like 25 and. You know, maybe I'm not going to die when I'm 30. I better think of something to do to keep me busy for a long, long time. And so I thought up SRL all based on that concern that I needed to have something to keep me busy. And I didn't want to get a 9-to-5 job. So I just, you know, I spent a couple weeks and I really thought up a whole system. You know, making all the machines, doing the shows with them, doing the whole propaganda around them, and, you know, working with other people to make it all happen, you know, having great partners and stuff working with, and you know, I formed it as a company to make so there was room for other people to be involved, and you know, it seems to have, you know, it's grown in a way that you know, keeps it direction always changes, it keeps it interesting. But for me, it's like you know, I just always keep imagining more projects, and so. That's, it's, you know, I always am trying to figure out how to make it happen. You know, whether it's moving everything up to Petaluma, 180 tons of crap to Petaluma and figuring out how to pay for it, or, you know, any of that stuff. It's, you know, it's like, I still really, I have to say, I confess, I still really like doing it. It's still lots of fun.
Good. Is
So,
ambition,
that's why I do it.
beautiful, is ambition based more on fear or joy?
I don't really know what it's based on. It's sort of like fire, right? Like you start the fire and it's simple, right? You just start a little fire on a piece of paper and then the whole thing burns, right? And I think that, you know, ambition's sort of the same thing. Once you decide you really are the kind of person that wants to really do things, it doesn't really matter how wet the paper is, how impossible it is. You just still, you know, it's still fun to. You know, ambition is more about, it's not even really about enjoying what you do, it's just about doing it and getting it done. When you get it done, you know, if you ever, you know, then when you feel weak or, you know, you have a crappy day, you can always go, well, you know what, at least I did that, you know. I did that, that was hard to do, even if I'm having a shitty day today. I did something that I kind of, you know, was fun for like 2 minutes after I did it until I just, you know, until I went on to do the next thing, so. You know, I think it's like rainy day funds. You know, it helps keep you from being self-destructive.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the problem with you know, with not being able to control your direction. Is if you lose the sense of your story, then you go off the rails and anything can happen. You know. And it's always about, you know, ambition is always about keeping your story straight and not going off the rails. Because when you do that, you hurt yourself and other people around you, and that's, you know, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there. I don't want to jump.
Yeah.
You know. I like looking off the edge, but I don't like the jumping part is.
Well,
not for me.
the jumping part. Were you a member of the Suicide Club?
I wasn't, but I knew. I met all those people a long time ago. John Law called me up, and he called me up with this crazy story, and he goes, I got this friend who's like, he's like, well, there's been a really bad thing happen. Like, my friend like killed himself with a machine gun, and he left. There's this human skin, and we took the human skin out of his refrigerator, moved it to another friend's house, and we got in there because we didn't want the police to find that. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And like he goes, but I want to know if you want the skin, and I'm like, okay. And it was just this guy that called me up. I think that was before I ever met him, and so he brought it over, and I put it in the refrigerator, and they all had a book opening party for Modern Primitives, and we had Greg Colts tattoo it and make it into like it looked like a full body tattoo, and so that was on display at the event.
Well, John was sort of mentioning this to me before, because.
So that's how I.
Right.
And then the Suicide Club was the Cacophony Society was I think right after that. And I just remember that they they were really Michael and John Law were really excited about SRL stuff, and they had a newsletter that they put out, and I remember they publicized the show we did in 1981 with 80 Langdon Street that was over in it was on Folsom, and it's one of those big lots that's a fancy high-rise now, but I remember they publicized it, and we had like 400 or 500 people come to shows. This was 1980 or I think it was 1981. So we had 400 or 500 people show up at shows, but in that show, like a couple thousand people came out. I was like, whoa, what are these people doing here? And I think it had something to do with the Cacophony Society putting it out on their list.
Yeah. Well,
things to do.
The basic was, how did they, Suicide Club and Cacophony, influence you philosophically? If you weren't specifically a member, did the Suicide Club have an effect on you, your ideas and your creative process?
Well, I didn't know much about the Suicide Club. I used to know about more of it as a joke. I knew that, but I knew that the Cacophony Society went into all these places, but I was going into all similar kinds of places, but I was actually bringing stuff out. Yeah. I mean, for me, that was the whole. It was mining. It was mining all these factories and places around the city where there was all this industrial equipment, and so I was in there working. When they were in there playing and wearing suits and stuff like that, I was working.
Right.
So, but I think originally it was I heard about them before that because I was doing billboards in 1978. And then these other people started doing billboards. I saw other billboards. Hey, there's other people doing billboards. And then I heard it was the billboard. I don't know if they called them the Billboard Liberation Front back then, did they?
I don't know.
In 1979 or 78.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I remember.
Well, what first attracted you to pursuing changing billboards?
Well, because I got a show. I got my professor in college was a nice guy. Good artist, and his wife had a gallery in my hometown, Sarasota, Florida. And he said, "Hey, my wife wants to have you in her gallery." And I said, "Great, that's a great idea, So I went and met with her, and then I went to the meeting where I had to lay out what I was going to do, and what I had decided to do was just take all these billboards around Sarasota and put my own images up there, and change them all to make them say what they really were saying. I was going to reinterpret them and figure out what they really meant, and then take photos of those and put them up in their gallery." And I told her that, and she just kind of looked at me and she goes, "Well, we can't do that." And I said, she goes, "That's illegal." She goes, "That's against the law." Kind of this with her so innocent kind of look on her jaw-dropped face, and I was like, "Well, okay." And then I just walked out, and I was like, "I gotta get out of here." Then I moved out to San Francisco and started doing that.
Beautiful.
So I wanted to do it back then in '77, but I ended up.
But I'm asking you, how'd you get that idea of changing a billboard? That's like a massive sort of thing that I
just thought it up. Well, I was always interested in advertising.
Yeah.
You know, I always was prided myself in the golden age of advertising. I always prided myself on being a person that had no effect on me when I was a teenager. And so I could look at an ad and it wouldn't, you know, communicate with me. It wouldn't hypnotize me. You know, I was always feeling like I was fighting Satan in coming out of the ad and ideas in the ads, and I was always looking in the ice cubes of the whiskey ads, you know, looking for the devil in there. I knew the devil's face was in there somewhere. You know,
You were reading Hidden Persuaders then?
Yeah, I think I read Hidden Persuaders back then, but I read a lot of that type of book. But anyway, so, you know, I just saw it and I said, you know what needs to happen is these need to be reinterpreted.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen.
Very good.
And so I resolved to do that.
Actually, McLuhan wrote the first book on We Should Study Advertising. It came out in '51 called The Mechanical Bride. So on to McLuhan, he says everything we invent extends some human part of us. So like clothing's an extension of our skin. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Film editing extends blinking. What does we're going to do a couple with you. What does the zip gun extend for you?
Well, the zip gun extended my, you know, when I was a kid, I went on a field trip, and the field trip was to the police museum in Port Charlotte, Florida. And in that museum, I became, you know, I was like 10 years old, and they had zip guns. They had all these heroin, they had H, you know, like the horse. They had all this stuff on display, and they had zip guns. I was like, wow, that looks pretty easy to make. And so I started making all these zip guns with my brothers. We made a bunch of every kind of zip gun you can imagine. We cut the spokes out of Harley motorcycles and used the spokes screw the spoke on backwards and made all these things where you hold a torch under it and it would blow up, and took shotgun shells apart. You know, zip guns were like, you know, like when you get tired of slingshots, when you get tired of spear guns, when you get tired of bows and arrows, and you know, that kind, and BB guns, but you're not quite ready for a real gun.
Yeah.
Zip gun.
That's good. But what humanness is it extending in you? What human facility? It necessarily has to be a tangible.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a human facility. It's more like it's like a human fascination with fire, because it's almost like a godlike thing. You know, like to control fire is like makes you that much closer to the gods. So for me as a kid, you know, fire in terms of, you know, like using the fire to set off the explosive and the zip gun, and you know, that to me was like it made me feel like a better Catholic.
Very good. How about this one? We all need to be better Catholics. Actually, Frank Zappa said, I'm a devout capitalist instead of devout Catholic. So what do you think the remote control, which has been a tool you've used for most of your career here, what human facility, what human sensorium does that extend?
Well, I mean, when I run a remote control machine that I've built, you know, that I've been really involved in, you know, I don't build the electronics for them. There's the computer crew, you know, various computer people have built those. But, you know, the goal of making the control is to make it so it's sort of transparent, so it works, you know, so the response is pretty good and stuff. And the commercial controls are pretty responsive too. But basically, you know, what I find is that, you know, maybe it's just part of the fact that you've made it and you really understand exactly how it works. But you know, you can load yourself into the machine, and the machine loads part of itself into you, even though you're just moving sticks around or buttons or something like that. You know, that's really all it takes. It's kind of like in the same way you can read a few sentences and a whole movie goes in front of your head. You know, I mean, the human, you know, it's part of just the standard tools that a human had, mind, body tools you have, where you can just have a small amount of input and your mind will create the envelope that makes it seem like on a much deeper, the interaction becomes a much deeper one. And so for me, when I run a machine remotely, I can, you know, like when I'm moving the machine around, when it moves, I can feel it. It's like
Yeah.
it's like it's touching me, or part of me is moving.
Yeah.
I mean, you can feel it inside you moving around in your body,
Yeah.
and just by touching the control, you can do that. If the control's design, if it's responsive enough, you can do
So
that.
would you say it was extension of your consciousness, or something even more than that?
You know, it's almost like it's more like a phantom limb. That's what it feels
Phantom
like.
limb, yeah.
Phantom limb. It's like it's there, but it's not really there. You feel it,
Yeah.
but you can't. But the thing, the bottom line is, and the practical implication is that you can control things to within like a fraction of the point of where it's unsafe, or to yourself when you're in a tight spot, or unsafe for the machine or for other people. So so far, knock on the woods under here, knock on the wood, but that's what for me, that's part of the thrill of doing it. Part of the thrill is when you're in a show, or even just, but really when you're in a show, when you're running them, and it's so loud you can't hear anything. You can barely see anything because there's so much light and explosions going on, or crazy stuff going on. But you're touching these controls, and the machine is just almost running itself.
Yeah.
And and then you look around and you go, wow, it's like you created like you created like a jungle.
Yeah.
And all these things are alive in it. You kind of, on the one hand, you're paying attention, of course, because you don't want anything bad to happen. But on the other hand, you feel there's always a part of that, or like maybe a second self that's always watching it from right here and going, wow, that's cool. Look at that. It's like it's real. You got to stay busy, but still, and that to me, that's there's all kind of weird sensations that I experience in working with powerful kinds of mechanical things, or even electrical things, even computers. I feel the same way about a computer. I mean, when I'm messing around with a computer, it's the same, a nice fast computer where everything's working, a Mac, not a Windows machine. I usually don't feel that way with my Windows machines, hate to say. But like a good machine, a good piece of equipment, you feel like it's part of you.
Yes.
And not consumer machines, but like real industrial machines, or they have to be like that, because you wouldn't be able to get work done unless they were like that.
Well articulated, thank you, Mark. And the last one about extensions, I'd love to hear your opinion, because a lot of us, I mean, I first met you at a video store in Santa Monica when you were selling a VHS tape of your performances. So this question is, what does moving image documentation of SRL extend? What human sensorium does it extend? Because the history of a lot of people consuming SRL is we can't all have been there all the time, so we either bought VHS tapes or we bought DVD, and then we watch it on YouTube. So let's just call that moving image documentation. What does that extend? What human sensorium?
Well, since the beginning of, I was kind of involved in making movies and stuff when I was in college, primitive, 16, animated movies, or other kind of live action movies. I did a little bit of that, but, like everybody in college, but, art college, but, I did develop an appreciation for capturing things, and, I just felt it was more like a responsibility. Really, I mean, there were people out there like Joe Reese at Target Video, and there were people out there that had the equipment that really were like obsessed about it. I mean, Joe Reese, and then John Reese, no relation, but anyway, those they were really, their idea was there was history going on and they wanted to record it. That was in the very beginning, and so they were there and they were willing to do it, and I was like, I made room for them to be able to come in and start doing it. I made sure that it wasn't just about doing the show, it was also about making sure, and a lot of people really didn't like that. A lot of people really said, Mark, you shouldn't let these people walk around with cameras and they're getting in the way of the audience. I was like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, I just said, and I always said, no, it's important they're here, and they're just as important as the audience, and that's a bunch of bullshit. I think it's really important, and so, I don't know, I mean, the good thing about it is that there's all these videos of all these shows. Every show is pretty much documented, and there's dozens of documentaries basically that have been made, and they're really small. They don't take up much room. They take up a couple shelves. It's not like the machines. The machines, when you get them done, they take up like a whole 10,000 square foot warehouse.
Right.
You know, and so that's the really good thing about video is it's really small. I mean, and you know, if you copy it enough times, it's pretty much permanent.
Yeah.
But it's as permanent as the machines are.
Yeah.
So you know, I just think that it's, you know, it's a responsible thing to do, to be able to, you know, so what, you know, I mean, and you know, for me, part of doing this has always been that you know, I'm just doing these kind of experiments and just fooling around and making things that I think are kind of interesting, and then I do the shows as sort of like my thesis about the things, and so you know, the idea is that I want people to see it, or at least on some level, and so I don't really know that the videos really extend the experience completely. I mean, everyone has, you know, I've heard that complaint too. It's like, oh, it's not like the real thing. But you know, it isn't the real thing. That's the whole point. But the fact of the matter is at least it sort of, you know, it proves it happens. It's like when you're, you know, like when you're in a forum or where you're talking about something to somebody you don't know online or something like that, and they go, well, show me a video, you know, like, how do I know it happened? You know, send me a picture. So it's like, you know, you can, in this day of like people saying anything they want, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know who they are, what they are, you don't know if it's true or not. I mean, at least if you have a video of it, you know that it happened.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you have videos from back then, because you know you couldn't fake them back then.
Yeah.
And so it really did happen, you know.
Yeah.
It's like photos in the 1890s or the turn of the century. They're real.
Yeah.
They really were something that was there. So.
Well, it's interesting. D.W. Griffith said that in 2014, which is in 2 years, cinema will end military, will end warfare. He had this prediction. Funny, because about a month ago, the papers were claiming cinema caused a war, or, you know, flap over violence. You know, a 14-minute film dissing Mohammed caused...
Did you watch the video?
I haven't watched it, but I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm just saying.
You should watch the video.
Right. I'm not saying it did or didn't. I'm just saying that the paper said this film caused it. So, you know, the bottom line question here is, we've had a slew of 20 years of pretty good political documentaries. My question is, do you think they more activate or more pacify people?
Political documentaries?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like watching documentaries and stuff like that, but it doesn't really, you know, you're talking to an old guy. I mean, I'm not going to go out and shoot anybody anymore, you know. You know, there was a time when I was like ready to go to war, you know, but that's not my, you know, I don't really, probably not going to do that these days.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, inciting people is, you know, I guess it's good. I mean, I like I think it's important because it's always, you know, you can read all the news you want and you can look at it all, but you know, and you can be as smarter than anyone you know, and all that stuff. You can be all these things, but you still are going to miss the point a lot of times. Yeah. And I think when someone really takes a special care to make, you know, makes an attempt to get at a certain part of the truth, or you know, a sliver of the truth, and they go to all the trouble to make a documentary film about it, then good on them. And it's a good, you know, I've seen a lot of those things, and they make me go, wow, I never thought of that. That's a good way to put that. And so yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I'm not really, I'm not much of a believer. And so things like that, even a good idea like that, it kind of, you know, I see it and I go, yeah, you know, that's a good idea. I never thought of that before. And then I don't really, you know, I log it, and then, you know, I don't really, I mean, if I was, I think movies like that, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, I mean, for me, it's really believing in something and not really to the point where you can't change your mind about it. Isn't, you know, I don't consider that to be a very good thing. Yeah. You know, I mean, there's some things I don't change my mind about over the years. There's some things that are very, you know, stable in my belief system. But there's other things that, change with new information that I get. And so, you know, that's what I think it's good because I think that they more change what I think than really calcify it.
Yeah.
And I think that is what a lot of these things do. You know, like the Muhammad film is just more calcifying people's beliefs. I don't think it really is.
Well, that's interesting. I'm glad you said that because our book came out recently called something like The Believing Brain, and they said seeing is believing is not really the way it is. What we do is we believe something, and then we only see that which supports that belief. So it's interesting that we do get these political docs, and they give us maybe a wider picture, deep research on it. And, you know, the question is, can they actually motivate us to do anything? Battle of Algiers, one of the most important political docs we ever had, the Black Panthers used it as a training film. Then, years later, George Bush used it as a training film. And it's basically a fake documentary.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, we don't know if film, you know, like D.W. Griffith saying, hey, in a couple of years, you know, 100 years from when he was saying this statement, we can end warfare with cinema. It's like, good luck. You know, everything we invent changes us, but can you actually make a film and change people?
Well, I think that when ideas proliferate, you know, in sort of a parlor game kind of speculative way, you know, I always have my theory about information. My information theory is that when you have enough information, then it just sort of the more you have, the more likely all of it is to be meaningless. You know, because the ability for people to really pick out, you know, you really have to really pick out something and decide that that's what you believe in. You know, with all these other things around you, it's you know, it's not a very. I think it's a hard decision to make, honestly.
Well, you said earlier.
I think it's more atomizing than anything else. Yeah. It's more, you know, at least for me, that's the way I feel about it.
Well,
that's why I need to get more all the time.
Well, that's what it seems interesting. You say you read like 10 newspapers a day, or a lot. You consume a lot of information, but it also seems that you know how to what's called read between the lines. So you sort of process the information.
Well, I try to.
Yeah, and so that goes.
I'm really good on those like NPR like quizzes. What's the one at the end of the week?
Yeah.
About the news. Wait, don't tell me. I can always get every one of those. That's how much news I read. I never ever have missed one of those ever.
Well, this question is about a term you used earlier, which I love, speed reading. And I talked to Michael Apted, a filmmaker, about 30 years ago. I asked him this question. I says, why do rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast? And he says, because we have learned to take in information faster. And my question is always, well, have we learned to take in information faster, or have we just brainwashed ourselves to believe we could? Well, I talked to Craig Baldwin about this. He says, no, we've learned how to take in information faster. Look at speed reading. But the basic question is, can humans actually multitask?
I don't know. I can't. When I want to dink around, I call it. When I don't want to feel very serious, then I multitask. I do that to relax. I don't do it to. I do it for fun. I don't do it for any practical.
To accomplish.
To get anything done. No. If I want to get anything done, it's like monomania. You know, that's the way to do it. That's the old standby. It always works.
How'd you develop that skill? Logic or learning,
like
or
a little touch of autism or something like that. You know, Machine Boy. What was it, Joey the Machine Boy? You know, the kid who had to like make a whole Rube Goldberg machine to go to the bathroom. You know.
Really.
You know, I just. You know, I always kind of liked to play alone. I, appreciated it. You know, I had like 3 brothers around me. Maybe that's what drove me to it. But, you know, I just have always...
Older or younger?
1 older and 2 younger.
Yeah. Mark, this is great. I really appreciate this. And this question concerns your motive and intention when you're making your piece of art, your event. And Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much does the audience play in you making your piece before you made it? Are you thinking about your audience while you're making it?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but even just down to the individual machines and then the props and stuff like that. I mean, I don't do all the props myself, but I design a lot of the props. But when I'm doing that and thinking about the kind of the theme that the show's going to coalesce around, but it's always about what's worked well in the past and how well do you want this effect to work, and like where does this like it's basically the shows are all kind of sight gags. I mean, there's no real language in the shows, and so it's all a bunch of like sight gags strung together, and if it's done correctly, it comes across as like a narrative kind of, a contiguous event, like a kind of a living world of machines. And so, I think about how to put them together, and I think about what magnitude of effect and what type of effect they're likely to have. And that is, there's a, factoring in, where it's going to be, the type of audience that it's going to, because, sometimes we do shows in, I mean, the last show I did was in the Museum of Modern Art. It was all the rich people that were, it was for the opening thing, so it was the fancy people, and, so I made sure I did something that would grow, have an effect on people. And Alan Kelly did a great video of that. I should have brought that with me too, but that was really good from the museum show. But that was all tailored to that audience.
Yeah. So you keep
And
your audience in mind in the process.
I do keep the audience in mind. In that case, it was a very stark environment, and so I was able to sort of hone it in pretty well. And then Alan Kelly did just a fantastic documentary that really like pulled out the whole, really laid the whole situation out. It was really very good.
Very good.
But that, I try to do that all the time, and with all the shows. Sometimes it works better than others, but it's sometimes it's easier to do. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to really worry too much about that. Sometimes you just got to get it together and throw a bunch of stuff out there and pray. Yeah.
And so you've been doing this almost 3 decades or more.
More than 3 decades.
More than 3 decades.
34 years.
34 years. What are the major elements of it that have remained the same, and what are the major elements that have changed?
Well, when I thought about it in the beginning, I remember sitting in the coffee shops in 1978, and I was like, yeah, I'll do these, make these machines. I'll make them kind of like alive, kind of. And then I'll do these in these public areas. And I remember thinking about it and thinking, yeah, there'll be all these machines, and like there'll be lights on them and stuff like that. It'll be like kind of dark and kind of scary, and there'll be all these crazy fire and special effects and stuff. And I remember thinking of it like that, and it's still kind of like that. I hate to say, it's sort of redundant.
But that stayed the same.
But
what has changed in the 30 years or 30 years plus?
Well, I just keep making. I'm always trying to go in a different direction. I mean, now it's more technical, because I have a nice clean shop now and things are organized. I mean, I didn't want to move. I would have stayed in my pig pen shop for 100 years if I could have, but with all the leaks and everything and rats, but they wouldn't let me. The owners were like not having it.
Yeah.
But the basic premise of it, I guess, and the basic appeal to me is still there.
Yeah.
And but I always try to do something new. Which is sometimes that involves new tools and new techniques. Sometimes it involves new people coming in. Sometimes it involves different types of shows. But they're all kind of the same fabric.
Yeah.
So and it's all tied together kind of by the same adolescence or juvenile. I don't know. Some people call it juvenile. I call it more playful.
Yeah.
I mean, I consider it to be a comedy. I'm consider myself to be kind of a comedian.
It's almost like vaudeville.
And so and so I try to those are things that have just stayed consistent, but to make them stay consistent, to make the fundamental things like the interest to me and the interest to other people, and to make it all keep doing what it's always done, I think, which is to function as a kind of as a system. You have to always be putting new input into it. And so that's so it always is going off in different directions. But it's only, the only reason to do that is so you can maintain the same kind of freshness at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, Moshe Feldenkrais works with movement and healing. And he says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Can you tell us a weakness that you've actually incorporated to become a strength?
Well, well, I was always the kind of person that would get really mad at things. And so
Inanimate things.
Yeah, inanimate things would just drive me crazy from when I was a little kid on, and sort of being able to harness my anger towards inanimate things and get them to do what I want to more and more has, I mean, it kind of, me fidgeting around and being frustrated with something is what almost got me killed when I blew myself up. So, that was the turning point, so to speak. And so after that, I really buckled down, and it took me, it's something, all my anger at things is always something I never really get mad at people. I don't even have any enemies, but from what I can tell. And so, but machines are always something I'm deeply suspicious of them.
Yeah.
And I know that they're out to get me. And the fact of the matter is, they are out to get you. I mean, I was working with this huge, like a 5,000–6,000 pound lathe, and it was like midnight, and I was cutting this part, and I was like, you know what? I said, why every time when I look at these machines, why do I always want to stick my arm into the machine? And I just think, man, that's been this every time I do this, and it's been decades. And I always just want to jump into the middle of it, but I just never do. But I always go,
you have the
I
thought.
still want to do it. I was last night, I was getting ready to cut the metal, and I was thinking, am I going to want to jump into the chuck? Come on. I said, I'm not really going to want to, because it was a kind of stringy material. I knew what was going to happen. I just had to make a little cut. And I was like, okay. I'm not even going to make much of a cut, but am I still going to want to jump into it? And I was like, God damn it, I do want to do it. But I didn't. Just like I always don't.
Right, isn't it?
So,
but it's like almost your mind has to go there to not do it. It's almost like, oh, I can imagine the worst, so I won't do it.
Yeah, so for me, being able to get that under control is important for me, and for people coming to these shows. And I've always, it's made me very aware of what's dangerous and what's too dangerous.
Yeah.
And so far, it's worked out. But it's an important sense to have, and I think unless you, I always have a personal, it's a personal battle for me.
Yeah.
But it probably also has something to do with why I do what I do.
Yeah. Mark, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, conviction gets back to like being a believer.
Yeah.
If I have convictions, it's like saying I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Because it's like implying that it's like a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
If you have convictions, then somebody else must not have them.
Yeah.
And so that makes you better than them. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really even know. Convictions to me has a pretty bad connotations.
Yeah.
Conviction means you believe in something and you're not ready to hear what anyone else has to say about it or what they believe in. So I think that's maybe not so good. Compromise, everything's, compromise is like, I had to take a leak. I drink some water today. I had to compromise. I mean, I would rather have not drank water all day. I would have rather not eaten today. I mean, I had to compromise. I had to eat breakfast, and I ate lunch, and I ate a healthy lunch because I said I got to do this damn thing tonight. And so, if I don't eat a good lunch, I'm probably not gonna make it. And so, I had to compromise. I could have just eaten like I could have eaten a candy bar, or eat a couple packs of sugar or something, but I didn't. And so, I mean, compromise is something, I don't feel like it's a, conviction to me seems like more of a bad thing than something to avoid than compromise.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, compromise is good because there's a limit to compromise. There's no limit to convictions. Convictions, you can say, I believe this, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
I believe this, I'm going to kill all you.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's what a conviction is. It doesn't have an end point. It can, it's infinite.
Yeah.
But, that's the good thing about a compromise, is it always, at a certain point, you just say, you know, everyone says no at a certain point.
Yeah.
So,
Is loyalty based on reason?
well, what do you mean by reason? Do you mean like reasonableness?
It's actually for
Do
you
you-
to put
do you-
in
do you
context.
mean like-
you can
do you
put it
mean
as
like-
you
Well,
choose.
if you,
Yeah.
okay, so if you mean loyalty, the point where you will sacrifice yourself for the benefit of another person, well, you know, I mean, if that person's a stranger, maybe not, you know,
Yeah.
but if it's someone who you care about, then I don't think, you know, I think loyalty is essential.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I just remember I was about 10, and me and my mom were driving. It was kind of like really late at night. She was taking us somewhere, and all of a sudden we came around a corner, and there was this crashed car that was flipped over and overturned in the side of the road, and we were just like, whoa, and it had just happened, and my mom just like stopped and looked, and she kept going, and me and my brother were in the car, and I said, aren't we going to stop and like help him or something like that? And she goes, no. I was like, well, why not? And she goes, well, what did she say? She said, she didn't really say much. She got kind of like quiet.
Yeah.
And then I asked her about it a couple times later, and then she finally just said, well, you know, I didn't really feel like I wanted to expose you. You know, you're 10 years old. I really didn't feel like if someone was like dead and mutilated and really injured, she goes, it looked to me like someone was really hurt. And I didn't want you to see it. You know, I didn't want to expose you to that, because I knew you would want to go over there and look at it, and I wouldn't have been able to stop you probably. So, you know, I felt like it was better to do that. But I've kind of like, I always have gone back to that and thought about it. And I think that, you know, maybe that was true, but I think also it was like my mom felt like she had to reserve her loyalty
Yeah.
to her family. You know, her loyalty couldn't go beyond that envelope.
Yeah.
And I understood it, and you know, I thought a lot about what it meant after that. You know, like how far that sphere of loyalty extends. You know, does it extend your immediate family? Does it extend to all your friends? And you know, I've done things for my friends that have been, you know, I mean, I have taken that far. You know, I've gone to court over it. You know, I've almost lost everything over it, just on principle.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why even I did it, but you know, again, it's like, I mean, loyalty is important when it comes to not having regrets about what you didn't do or did.
Yeah.
I mean, if my mom regretted not stopping, you know, I think she should have stopped.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was too young to regret. I didn't know, you know. But for me, you know, loyalty stops when the regrets start.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me of the question Bruce asked, on what occasion do you lie? I usually get people go, well, to protect my family, or to, you know, to be kind to my friends, you know. And it's an interesting. Mark, is perception reality?
Well, I don't know. I mean, my perception is my reality, but I don't think my perception is anyone else's reality.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the buck stops here. I don't really expect any. I'm always surprised when people agree with, you know, something I say or an opinion I have.
Yeah.
You know, almost as surprised that I haven't as I do when I see I have an opinion about something.
Yeah.
So.
And T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. So we all have these inner dialogues going on in our heads, and he says this is getting it out. This is two parts. What language is your inner dialogue in, and / what form is your inner consciousness in?
Well, my inner dialogue is, a lot of it is geometric.
Is it really?
It's like intersections. It's like I see, it's all geometry or trigonometry or whatever, you know, if you want to get more complicated ones seem like trigonometry. But for me, you know, when I am trying to figure out like a situation, I break it down into angles and lines and you know, like, and three-dimensional shapes moving in and around each other. That's kind of how I visualize things. I visualize things like that. And you know, if I have a problem to solve, I try to break it down to simple forms and sort of move the forms around like chess, kind of like weird geometric chess pieces. And I find that it's, I don't really know why, but maybe it's just wasting, you know, marking time until it figures something out.
Yeah.
But it seems to work. It's very soothing.
Yeah.
But it seems to work for me for resolving all kinds of problems. But that's how, that's my inner dialogue is shapes. It's shapes and it's patterns.
Yeah.
You know, patterns like when I, you know, like if I'm trying to find something in my shop with a million or two
Yeah.
things in it, you know, I visualize the thing and then I visualize the related things that might be near it.
Yeah.
And then I have a map of that, you know, so that's how I solve that kind of problem.
Yeah.
That's a pattern problem.
Yeah.
But if I have a problem with, you know, with people, you know, if I'm trying to figure out something, if I'm trying to figure out something about my son, if I have a question about my son and about like why he's doing what he's doing, I think about like, you know, I'm thinking about me, his mother, you know, his life, and trying to like, you know, and those are like all, you know, kind of geometric forms, and
Yeah.
you know, some are closer, some are further away, like kind of a three-dimensional theremin. And then once you get the tune, then you get the answer. You know, so it's sort of like that.
That's a good visual. Three-dimensional theremin. I want one of them.
Yeah.
Mark, that's great. You brought up that question or that thing about your son, because I asked someone.
Right back there.
Yeah, I asked someone. What should I ask Mark about bees? They interviewed you so many times. Amazing interviews with Mark throughout research magazines, and he says, well, ask him about raising his kid. And so then I asked my dear friend Eric, and he says, no, ask him this question. Say, what if you buy a toy for your kid and he destroys it? How does it make you feel?
Well, like it's time to get, you know, it's time. He feels like it's time to move on to a different toy. Usually it's sanctioned. Usually he destroys it, it's sanctioned. Unfortunately, his toys tend to be cheap Chinese junk.
Yeah.
Or like maybe a little bit not so cheap, but you know, when he's outgrown it, it's time to destroy.
Yeah.
So sometimes we burn holes in it with magnifying glasses. Sometimes, you know, we run over it with something. Sometimes we put a bomb under it and blow it up. You know, you know, sometimes we drown it. There's all kinds of ways. How do we get rid of those things, Jake Eddie? Yeah, hammers are good. Yeah.
That's Mark Twain has the great line. When I have a hammer in my hand, everything looks like a nail. So this is a question, Mark, for you. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
What would I say to my 12-year-old self? Let's see. When I was 12 years old, I just looked like a, you know, a hipster looking for trouble, little hipster kid. So I probably would have said, you know, just another slouch. I probably would have said another slouching, no good, you know, kid who will maybe turn into something. But right now, it just looks like a sloucher to me. You know, that's probably what I look like to anybody else. It was like, what is that weird kid with his affectations?
Yeah.
You know, and so you know, I would look and I would see, you know, if he really had some good affect. I mean, because I had a whole range of affectations when I was 12. I was very, you know, I had to really hone down, and so you know, I had a way of walking, walk my hands behind my back, kind of, you know, a crip walk kind of thing,
Yeah.
or whatever, you know, like the version of it that we did.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things, very keenly attuned to clothes and stuff like
Yeah.
that, or you know, certain clothes rubbed in grease and dirt, you know, to make them look like you know, a biker wore 'em or something. Engineer boots, you know, all that stuff. But you know, nowadays, you know, back then that was kind of a, you know, kids didn't really exhibit a style when they were like 12, you know,
Yeah.
but the crowd of people I was around did.
Yeah.
For some reason, a lot of them did, and that wasn't required like it is nowadays. But at the time, it was like considered to be a positive thing in the culture I was in. But now it's like all kids do that. I mean,
Yeah.
my kid, look at my kid now. My kid is like 8, and he wears like all like crazy name brand Nike stuff. You
Yeah.
know, I think it's great. You know, he dresses himself every day, and I take pictures of him in the mornings because he like has a totally styled outfit
Yeah.
every day, and I couldn't do that. You know, I was wearing a uniform when I was like, going to Catholic school.
Yeah.
White shirt, green pants.
Yeah.
You know, but that's cool.
Yeah.
I think.
Very good. And so this question concerns George Manupelli, great film festival founder in Ann Arbor, Michigan, says his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, experimental film icon in the East Coast, says there is no self-expression. Great Cecil Taylor, who's just doing a tour now, says I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. This question is sort of weird, but it's like, is art making more self-expression or more we're just vehicles for whatever dominant culture or technology is happening?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I try to stay away from questions of art and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not, you know, I think that's a little bit weird to say. It's like the whole selfless, you know, thing, exposition thing, like, oh, I'm just a vessel. And,
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to me, it's like, it's like when I hear people talk like that about art, it's like when I hear people, like Christians talk about evolution like it's real, you know, like it's not real. You know, to me, I'm like, you know, what's up with that? What's up with that mumbo jumbo, you know? And like, you know, to me, you know, in an art context, it's the same thing. I mean, people do art for the same reason that they, you know, that they do other things. It's just what they, you know, I mean, you know, maybe not their job things. People don't really necessarily do their jobs because it's what they want to do. It's what they fell into, you know. But, you know, people that have their hobbies or things that they just like to do, they do it because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like a better person to do. They don't, you know, and they think it's, you know, it's like a, you know, it's just how do you spend your time? If you spend your time doing something that you think is worth doing, you feel better.
Yeah.
You know, you're healthier in your mind. You're probably healthier in your body too. But, you know, and so people are attracted to those things, and they do them, and then they make up reasons for why they do them later.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I just do it because I like to do it. I mean, I could make up a million reasons why I do it, but I don't really feel like, you know, which is probably why I don't ever sell anything. That's probably why I don't sell any art, you know, because I'm not out there like saying, oh yeah, it's like I saw a light.
Right.
And that light was like the world, you know, and then you know, that whole.
Well, you know.
However, I don't know the special handshake, but I know there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into getting into that, you know, art scene. You know?
That art scene, and it's amazing because McLuhan's favorite line was, one of them was, the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. So it sort of evokes what you were saying, is like you don't consciously go, well, or another thing reading your past interviews, I thought it evokes this line, you get your job and your life as mixed up as possible. So there's no division, like now I'm going to go do my job, now I'm going to do my life. It's just like all one, you know. So Mark, why is it so difficult for humans to consider the possibility that life may be pointless?
Well, I don't know if it's that hard to do. I think that's a positive thing. Yeah. That's a very liberating, you know, kind of, it's almost theological. Yeah. Really. You know, to just the idea that there's no pointless, so why, you know, if it's pointless, then why not do something, why do what you want to do, right? You know, why not do something that feels is fun to do? Yeah. You know, interesting, or might get somebody else excited and maybe make them want to do something fun. I mean, you know, I think it's just a whole, you know, it's self-perpetuating a world where it's fun to live in. Yeah. You know, and like I saw all these great things when I was a kid, and I was like, you know, I didn't really see that they meant anything really, but what was important about them was that it got me to thinking, you know, there's some fun, cool stuff out there, you know, and like maybe I can do it and I'll do something, and some kid will be growing up and go, hey, that's a cool thing. I could do something like that. And like, or and get inspired and go off and create something that the next generation. I mean, there's got to be a way to create things that make life, you know, more than just eating and shitting and talking about what you're going to do, you know. So yeah, so I think that I'm getting tired now.
Well, we're going to wind up pretty soon. You've been really holding up good.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I feel bad because
don't
coming
feel
into
bad,
this,
man.
I saw a couple weeks ago. I saw Ken Goldberg talking to William Gibson on stage, and I was like, oh man. I remembered I had to do this, and I said, God damn it, man, that ruined it for me.
Oh,
Whatever. That was so good. It was really just.
Oh, this has been a delight, and we'll open up to the audience in a few minutes. And I just have a couple more. This one concerns dreams. You know, McLuhan also talked about James Joyce, who you mentioned earlier. His Finnegan's Wake was about, you know, we all have these amazing powers to create these scenarios in the middle of the night and dream. He says that artists also use those powers while they're awake, dreaming awake. So have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. Sometimes, like a lot of times, if I'm having, you know, I'm not a scientist, so my only hope for solving complicated problems, you know, that relate to building machines and actually getting them to work, is to just, idea just pops in my head. It's go, oh, that's how to do it, you know, because I can't do the numbers. So there's got to be another way to do it. So for me, sometimes that'll just, literally the solutions come in a dream, and I wake up next day and go, oh, that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
And then it works.
Yeah.
You know, usually that's, but you know, that's just, I think about it over and over and over again. I'm not smart enough to just know what I'm thinking about, really.
Yeah.
But I can dream the solutions sometimes, and you know, they're a little bit unconventional, and they work good enough for shows. But that's the good thing about dreams, is it can take the place of an education.
Yeah. Mark, how do you find peace of mind?
I don't know if I'm looking for peace of mind.
Very good.
So,
Never had that answer. That is a good answer. And geez, I have so many good ones I want. Oh, which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over.
Why?
Because it's because you can see it there, and then if there's poo stains on it, because somebody grabbed it, and you can see it going on, you can remove that part. But if it's underhanded, so the poo stains are going to be on the back side, and you won't be able to see.
You won't be able to see it. Very good.
You'll cross-pollinate your poo with someone else's.
Well, because you brought up poo stains, I got to ask you this one. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
What would I do? I don't know. I would duck. Yeah, I would duck.
All right.
Yeah.
And what is the most the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
Well, I think the healthiest cultural shift is that you know, more information is out there and available. I think more information ultimately results in secular, is more to the advantage of the secular world, which I feel a part of, and less a part of the sectarian world. So the more information there is, the less ignorance there is. The less ignorance there is, the less people believe.
Yeah.
And the more information there is, the harder it is for people to believe in one thing to the exclusion of other things. And I think that's just a world where people leave each other alone a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, at least on some level. And I think that's better. I think that's a positive thing about a trend that's going on.
Yeah. What gives you the most optimism?
I don't know. My kid.
Yeah. I do get that answer a lot. It's beautiful that they say the youth or kids or their families.
But I'm pretty optimistic. My
Yeah.
wife is extremely optimistic. My wife is frightfully optimistic. She's the only person I've met that's as fanatically optimistic as I am.
Jeez.
So
Well,
I appreciate the you know, it's like we live in a, but you know, not unrealistic,
right.
but you know, I think that optimism is seems to run in the family.
Well, since you brought up wife, I have to ask you this one. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
The most significant difference between men and women. Well, I don't know. Most of the women I know don't. They don't seem. Maybe I'm more female or something, but most of the women I know don't really seem that different than the guys I know.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I guess there are women that are really different than guys, but I don't know very many of them.
Yeah.
The ones I know, the guys I know are always all trying to be more like girls, and the girls I know are always trying to be more like guys. So it seems to all sort of even out.
Yeah, it's really good. I actually get that answer a lot.
And I don't get
People
confused
yeah.
about it, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying
No.
that I just, you know, I can't help but notice
Yeah.
that that's happening, and I think that that's,
Yeah.
I think it's good. It seems, you know, everyone I feel that, I see that in seems to be managing it pretty good.
Yeah.
So I guess it's all right.
Mark, it has been a pleasure and an honor, and I thank you so much.
Questions.
If you don't mind, we could open it up to the audience for a couple, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
Anybody, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Two wildly divergent but very quick questions for you. I really appreciate that you embrace modern technology and still do what you do with industrial equipment. What about voice-activated machines?
Well, you know, you mean like the clapper?
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, you know, I like talking to I love being able to dictate to a phone. You know, I think that's great. You know, Siri's kind of not very interesting. You know, but I don't know. I never really thought about that much because usually when I'm using a machine, there's so much noise in the background that I don't really think that they would pay much attention to it. I don't think it would work very well. That's a beautiful thought, though.
And
In a perfectly quiet world,
yeah.
a voice-activated machine would be great. Maybe an electric car or something.
Given your years of obvious subversive sort of activities, post-Catholic school epiphany, have you ever thought or have you gotten your Freedom of Information Act file? And if so, is there anything in there that you were surprised that they think you did?
I don't care about that stuff.
It's fun
You
to
know,
read.
all I know is that, you know, I'm sure the government, you know, I talked to the FBI once. I got interviewed after crime wave took me, and I think, did Dingle get interviewed too? I don't remember, but I know I did. They talked to me for a couple hours, some FBI agent, asking me all these crazy questions. And I did the whole, like, what was that movie, where the guy, I can't remember the name of it, I should. Anyway, I can't remember it, so it doesn't matter. I'll never be an academic. But it was a movie about a guy being interviewed by the police. But anyway, so yeah. So anyway, yeah. I don't know. I don't really worry about that stuff. You know, if they're going to come get me, they will. I'm not really. You know, anybody who's going to go up against me, all I can say is good luck. You know, they're going to get a run for their money. And so far, I think that I don't think no one really ever has. You know, no one's. You know, the other thing too is I don't really do anything that illegal. You know, or I would be in jail, right? I would have been.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
You know, I'd like to hear your take on that 14-minute Muslim film. I didn't see it.
Well, you didn't see it. It's
No.
just unbelievable. It's like, it's just amazing. I mean, you can see kind of like, it's really a perfect representation of like, kind of a person that sort of really wants to be hateful, but they're so inept that they can't really formulate it. And so it's just like, on the one hand, it's just like absurd, right? Like you look at it and like, how could anyone, like it's like a cartoon of someone, a cartoon hate movie, you know? It's just the most ridiculous thing. But you know, it just, and that's what's so amazing about it, and that you have to really watch it to see, but you watch it and you go, how could anyone, it's like a Monty Python video, a skit or something.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. I mean, I watched it like the day I heard about it, like a couple days, right the day it happened, like before the riots and stuff like that. I watched it. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I'd like to see the whole version of it, but you know, it's just, you know, someone spent a lot of time, and not very skilled time, but someone invested a lot of energy in it, and money. Someone invested money in it too, so. I mean, I thought it was very interesting. It was like, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, aside from like some of the K-pop videos, you know, it's like was my favorite like online video of the month last month. You know, K-pop, Korean pop.
Yeah.
To anyone, I am the best. That is the best one of all of them. The best. I recommend it to everybody. That and the Islam, the video. Those are the two best ones last month for me.
Go ahead.
What do you think of this idea of the singularity where machines are allowed to invent themselves and evolve?
Well, what I think is I think that I'm in a good position when that happens. Me and my friends who have worked hard to help me to make all these things happen, I think we're all going to be in great shape, because I think those machines are going to be like, yeah, you guys had it right. We're going to take over. You were right.
Yeah.
How did you know? How did you know? We didn't say a word. How did you know? And like they'll do, you know, we'll be like pets. We'll be like chihuahuas. You know? We'll be like nice pets, little pet people. And so I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, probably that's, you know, maybe it's inevitable, maybe not. I mean, on the other hand, you can look at it and say when technology is that advanced, there are 100 different directions you could go. I'm sure there'll be people who are like the classic uber human, you know. There'll be people who just want to be like, you know, super people. There'll be people that want to be part machine. There'll be people that want to be, you know, grow themselves into a different kind of creature. You know, there'll be all kinds of stuff. I just think that I don't think it's going to go in any one direction. People always present it like it's some monotheistic thing, like, you know, like when you hear Kurzweil talk about it, it's always kind of like, oh, you know, we're going to go this direction and we're probably going to go like this. And I'm like, no, that's not true. You know, when to me, it's more like Marvin Minsky is the one that thought up all the crazy non-anthropomorphic machines, right, and robots. Was it him? At Carnegie Mellon?
Well, he was at MIT.
At MIT, well, no, was it him?
Hans Moravec.
Hans Moravec, yeah, Hans Moravec was like always his shtick, part of his shtick. I don't know if I'm probably butchering it, but his idea was that you know, robots don't need to just look like a tin can man. You know, they don't need to look like humans. They really need to look in a way that is about their function, is related to their function more than anything else. And I think that, I don't think technology is, you know, when it becomes extremely advanced, is going to result in any kind of one direction. It's going to result in, just in the same way that being able to share information efficiently, or more efficiently, results in more information being shared. When technology becomes more advanced, it'll just result in more directions that people will go in with it. You know, to the point where you won't be able to keep track unless you're superhuman anyway, right? So.
Anyone else? Mark, it's really been a pleasure and honor. Thank you so much.